Welcome back. This is part 3. Our last topic of conversation this week is what content area teachers should know about literacy. I'm going to attempt to get this all into one part, but may have to create a fourth installment if that doesn't work. All right, before we get going, I wanted to LRD, or at least introduce you to the idea of LRD, which came from a text that I read when I was in the program, the Manzo and Manzo Content Area Literacy book, which I'm not sure you read anymore or not, but basically they have the idea of doing listen, then read, then discuss. Whereas typically we have students read, then they listen to some sort of lecture or class presentation on the topic, and then they discuss. Whereas if you invert the first two steps and do listen, then read, students have a preview of the content and then are empowered to read the material and then also have more schema and prior knowledge to bring to the material once they do read it. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you listen first and then read and you're like, oh, this is what they were talking about, and you seem to be more empowered, more interested in the topic because you already have that background knowledge. So I'm not sure what order you watch your lectures in. Maybe you listen, then read, and then discuss, which is what Manzo and Manzo agree is a better approach. So just wanted to introduce you to that idea before we start talking about what content area teachers should know about adolescent literacy. Again, this week you are reading that document, which is a resource. It summarizes and discusses the most recent adolescent literacy research, and it also describes research-based instructional practices. The first part goes over the 5 key components of reading: decoding / phonemic awareness and phonics, morphology, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. And then in the second part, they discuss assessment, writing, and motivation in regard to the adolescent literacy learner. So let's get going with the first part, talking about decoding. You should be widely familiar with the idea of decoding since we talked about this already. Decoding, otherwise known as word identification, is the ability to decipher a particular word. The sub-skills involved in this process of decoding are phonics, so associating the phoneme with the grapheme, and then also phonemic awareness, being able to produce those sounds and blend those sounds together in order to produce the word. Good readers can use knowledge of letters and sounds to pronounce unknown words. Only 10% of adolescent readers actually struggle with decoding, and that goes back to an article we read last week, which says that a lot of times readers are, adolescent readers especially, are misdiagnosed to needing remediation in phonics and phonemic awareness when that isn't necessarily the case. And as the National Institute of Literacy further asserts that only 10% of adolescent readers actually do struggle with decoding. So what should you do about it? Well, you can model phonemic awareness skills when introducing new vocabulary. Even if it is a 3-syllable word, you can break it down and segment it by sound and draw attention to the phonics patterns contained in that word. You also can provide instruction in phonics, especially multisyllabic and high-frequency words. See page 7 for ideas. And also on page 7 talks about the direct, explicit, and systematic instruction. So direct in that it's teacher-led and you are really teaching them. Explicit in that you're making it very clear. TION says shun. Let's listen to some words and see if we hear that shun sound. Let's take a look at what letters make that shun sound. Let's segment, let's blend. Really explicit instruction. And then it's systematic because you know developmentally that this would be the next step for them. They've already mastered the CVC words and the blends and the digraphs and the long vowels and the infrequent vowel and variant vowel spellings, and now here we are, multisyllabic words. We've done our systematic approach and we know that this is where they need to go next. All right, in the area of morphology, Morphology is the study of word structure, and so over here I like this little chart reminding us of free morphemes can stand alone like roots, whereas bound morphemes cannot stand alone. They are typically affixes, either derivational, which change the meaning, or inflectional, which do not. Morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning in a word. Good readers are able to use their knowledge of morphological structures to recognize complex words. Morphology impacts vocabulary and comprehension. So morphology helps you understand words at the word level, vocabulary, and then also words at the sentence, paragraph, passage level, which impacts comprehension. So what you should do to help students with morphology is to teach the morpheme's role in changing the meaning of the word. For example, ER, when applied to sing, is singer, someone who sings, whereas ER applied to the word bigger gives us a more extensive form of the word big. So talking about the role of ER in both of those words and how it differs. Also a good idea to teach syllable types. Closed, open, vowel, consonant, E, vowel pairs, vowel with an R, consonant with the LE, teaching base words, prefixes and suffixes, both derivational and inflectional, compound words, and function words. And a lot of times you can even do quick speed drills where they have to identify what the prefix, suffix is and what it means, just to get them to develop fluency in recognizing that part of the word as a morpheme and thinking about what it means. All right, next area they discussed was fluency. Fluency being the ability to read text accurately and smoothly with little conscious attention to mechanics. So it doesn't say anything here about rate. Remember we talked when we looked at fluency a little bit about the definition of fluency and what is it. It's not just reading quickly, it's reading accurately and reading smoothly in a way that mirrors fluid speech. And it's not a labored process. You're doing it subconsciously. So good readers have that automaticity where they are recognizing words automatically instead of spending a lot of cognitive mental energy on the decoding and comprehending at the word level. So they aren't having to labor, sound by sound to put together the word and then try to comprehend what the word is in relation to the greater, text, but they have that automaticity and they're able to, start to recognize words, strings of words, so that they can comprehend at a higher level. Practice is essential to fluency. You want to model fluent reading on a regular basis as much as possible. You can use repeated oral readings to help develop fluency with your students. You can do guided oral reading. Also, partner reading is helpful for that. All right, moving on to vocabulary. Vocabulary are words used in speech, both orally, so that they are producing, and orally, that they are receiving as input, and print to communicate. It requires word identification, word analysis, and syntactic awareness. So there are a lot of prerequisite skills involved in vocabulary. You need to identify what the word is, analyze the word for morphemes you might recognize, and then think about syntactic structure as well. Good readers are able to recognize more words, verbalize them, and learn word meanings. Repeated exposure to words is definitely the most beneficial way to learn vocabulary, but not only exposure to them, but practice producing and using and applying that word to their speech. Strategies include pre-teaching vocabulary before they run into it in a text, although I know Common Core standards kind of advocate against that because then you're enabling the reader not to use context clues and things when they do come to an unknown word. So they actually discourage you pre-teaching vocabulary to older readers because they want to see them using more strategies to determine what those words mean. Also, you can do direct instruction, page 17. And when we talk about vocabulary, that's not going to be until week 15. We go in depth with vocabulary, but we'll talk about the different tiers of words and how it's best to provide direct instruction on tier 2 words and sometimes tier 3 words, but typically tier 3 words are more technical and students come across them less. So tier 2 words are usually appropriate across different content areas, and it's a good idea to teach those ones as students will more readily see them. Also, having students bring prior knowledge to the word. For example, if they already have prior knowledge about the concept that the word represents, then it's going to be a lot easier to teach them the word. For example, the word fatigued might be a new word, but they already know what tired means, and so you can use their previous knowledge of tired to teach them this new word of, fatigued, because it's a concept they already know. And then, like I was saying, you really need to provide many opportunities for application across various settings. So it's not enough to just, have them see it, read it, but getting them to be able to produce and use it and assimilate it to their own vocabulary. All right, and next we have text comprehension. This is the process of extracting or constructing meaning. Good readers are purposeful, strategic, and critical. In order to develop comprehension, we need to be able to integrate text comprehension strategies into instruction. And I was actually reading a pretty interesting article in the Reading Teacher, which I love because it's so teacher friendly and just really applicable. Great journal. If you do not subscribe, you should, and you should be a member of the International Reading Association as well. But anyways, they were talking about how there's been so much emphasis on teaching the comprehension strategies in isolation versus teaching the comprehension strategies as a tool for understanding the content. So they actually advocated using the content to show how you would, use the comprehension strategies, but really the instruction is driven by the content of, Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt or whatever the content is you're studying versus making the comprehension strategies the content. And I thought that was such an interesting way of thinking about it because it makes those comprehension strategies more authentic and it helps the reader really see how can I apply these comprehension strategies to content versus treating the comprehension strategies as the content. So I thought that was a pretty interesting article. It's actually in the February issue of the Reading Teacher, and it's the first article, and it's by Debbie Miller, called "I Can Create Mental Images to Retell and Infer Big Ideas." And she talks about how important content drives the study versus the comprehension strategy. All right, a little bit of tangent there. We need to model the process of comprehension monitoring using, Think Alouds is a great way to do that. Also teach students how to summarize and especially extract the key pieces of information from the text. Big thing to do is to teach text structure, especially with expository text, because authors are really, determining what's the purpose of what I'm writing and then finding the text structure to help them execute that purpose, whether they're comparing and contrasting two different species or whatnot. So, helping students attend to what the text structure is going to teach them what the author's purpose is behind that piece of text. Also developing critical analysis and reasoning skills, using a gradual release of responsibility, and teaching them how to use multiple strategies at once. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop there and upload, and then we will just have one more